Hello there friends and welcome! Today we are at long last back to Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, as the latest and newest DLC, Void Shadows, has just been released. And it does add quite a lot of new stuff to the game, starting with a new full-scale companion, Kibellah the Death Cult Assassin, with two new archetypes, first Bladedancer, a base class, and also Executioner, a prestige one. Even new weapon types like the deadly multi-hitting chainsaw that can easily destroy anything for thousands worth of damage, new NPCs especially as crew members, and lots of very nice looking areas to explore, both inside your ship and otherwise. With an amazing amount of content and quests as well, spread through multiple chapters of the game. And you might have noticed you now have a DLC and mods tab here in the main menu, where you can check all of the content you have for the game, and also manage the mods you have installed. Just remember, because of the latest DLC and the newest patch, chances are you'll probably have to update some mods, just in case you're getting errors and so on. Oh, and before we get started, by the way, for some reason you actually have to turn the DLC content on, because by default I think it's off. You can do this when starting a new game or during an already existing run by just going to the menu. So without further ado, let us get into our Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader Void Shadows DLC guide. First with the gameplay mechanics, such as the new archetypes. And let us start with Bladedancer. This is definitely a very strong, quite busted and very fun to play new archetype. And well, for this guide I'll go with a quick overview on your most important abilities, as later I'll release a standalone guide with full build progression, especially as Kibellah, our new companion, starts as a Bladedancer. But anyways, your basic ability is already very good, Blade Dance. You start a game with this, and it lets you perform multiple melee attacks against adjacent targets, that is, enemies that are basically touching you, one square away. You can perform multiple attacks based on your agility bonus, each dealing 50% of the normal damage. This counts as a burst attack, which is great for synergy with the Arc Militant Prestige class, plus it does not count against the attack limit per turn, which means you can activate Blade Dance, get a flurry of attacks going, then still use your normal attack action. This can only be used with swords. The same is true for some other Blade Dancer abilities. And if you're dual wielding swords, you'll make multiple attacks with each sword. It may not sound like many attacks, but that's because this is at character creation, and the attacks are based on your agility bonus, which can be very high later, especially with the aid of ally buffs, like Officer and the Biomancer Psyker. Your second unique ability is called Death from Above and gained right at level 3, and definitely my new favorite one. It basically lets you leap in a 3-cell radius range, and you'll hit all enemies that are adjacent to the cell you land at, which means you don't actually target the enemy directly with this, rather a cell that's nearby. Well, the damage will be based on your agility bonus plus weapon skill bonus. Moving with it doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. As a matter of fact, you can even use it to move around the map, although it's not really efficient. But most importantly, this ability actually doesn't have any AP cost at all, nor does it prevent you from using your normal attacks, which means you can spam it as many times as you want. By default, you only start with one charge of it at the start of battle, but whenever you kill an enemy, you'll get one extra charge. And this can just go on and on and on, to further enhance the playstyle of Bladedancer, just slicing and dicing through the whole battlefield in one turn. What this means is you can combine Blade Dance with Death from Above and steal your normal attack, all in the same turn. Your ultimate ability, so your heroic action, is called Death Waltz. It basically enhances your Death from Above ability, lets you do it for free, and you'll then keep on slicing and dicing through that enemy multiple times per Death Waltz use. So essentially whatever target is at the receiving end of this is most likely going to be dead. Plus you can enhance it with very powerful stuff later, like extra charges instantly to Death from Above, and higher Death from Above damage as well based on agility bonus as a flat source of damage, something very powerful in this game. Besides that, you also have some unique abilities you can pick during level up, and some of them actually cost hit points to activate. My favorite and the most powerful one definitely being Blood Oath. This doesn't have a cooldown and also does not cost any AP, just like Death from Above, so you can spam it at will, well, so long as you have HP remaining. and essentially makes your next attack against an enemy always hit, so it cannot be dodged or parried, which is amazing for unfair mode. Plus, if the attack kills the enemy, you'll regain a lot of hit points, and even plus 1 AP plus an additional attack this turn. Now, the extra AP and attack will only trigger once, but as far as having 100% hit chance on your next attack and regaining hit points, it triggers every time. As far as your unique Bladedancer talents, there's also a lot of fun and powerful stuff here, including getting extra damage based on your agility bonus, especially if dual wielding, increasing your resolve by stacking amounts, and if you followed my previous Rogue Trader guides, you know stacking resolve is paramount to winning, because it's what lets your party spam your heroic actions as much as possible and as early as possible, and well, Bladedancer is all about killing enemies to trigger your Death from Above. Speaking about Death from Above, you also have talents that increase its damage, abilities to provide extra movement, even higher hit points based on your dodge, which is very powerful, even early in the game, because of how high dodge can go, plus the highly unique sweeping motions, which actually reduces the cost of your melee area attacks by -1 AP. Great because you can then hit multiple targets with just 1 AP, and combine it with, of course, Bladedancer and Death from Above in the same round. Overall, Bladedancer is definitely a very stacked archetype and extremely fun to play. Now what about Executioner? I'll be blunt, I was somewhat disappointed by it. So the whole point of Executioner is stacking multiple damage over time effects on the enemies and benefiting from that. First, your normal melee attacks will already apply bleeding by default, but through other party members and also class combinations, there's also burning and toxin. My issue with it is that it feels somewhat slow, because you know damage over time effects are only applied at the start of the enemy's turn. And Executioner as a prestige archetype, you can only select it starting from chapter 2+, at which point it's very easy to get extremely powerful alpha strikes in this game, to the point the enemies can't really react to your attacks. Turn 1. So I'd much rather them just be dead before having to wait until they suffer from the damage over time effects. On the other hand, Executioner does have a few abilities that kinda instantly apply the dot effects, such as Where It Hurts, your Pain Resonance, unique ability that does it as an area of effects surrounding you. So I'm sure it's just a matter of testing it more, and there's definitely some OP stuff you can do with it. Especially if you are, for example, a Pyromancer, Bladedancer Executioner, combined with some weapons that inflict toxin, so you have all the effects, damage over time ones anyways, on the same character. It's just that because it is a prestige archetype, it kinda has to compete with, let's say, Assassin, which is my preferred choice for melee, or Master Tactician, absolutely busted for Psyker, Blaster Caster based ones. Assassin also has extreme synergy with Bladedancer because your most unique ability, Killing Edge, that adds an absurd amount of extra flat damage to your normal attack damage based on lethality, which is based on dodge, which is based on agility, another important Bladedancer stat. Well, the only limitation is that this grants the enemies a very high chance of dodging and avoiding your attacks, which on unfair matters because they have boosted stats. However, you can easily combine it with the ever so spammy Bladedancer's Blood Oath, which does make your next attack always hit the enemy, including if it comes from Killing Edge. And the faster you're killing enemies as a Bladedancer, the more you're spamming your other powerful abilities like Death from Above. So while I think Executioner can be good, I just don't think it's going to be as good as Assassin or Master Tactician. Now let us cover our two new weapon types added by the Void Shadows DLC, starting with my favorite one, the Chainsaws. Chainsaws are unique in that they actually hit the enemy multiple times per single attack, starting at 3, but some can even hit for 5 times per attack action. While the base damage is rather low, this is the type of game where you can increase it by enormous amounts, especially from the highly OP Malpian Shroud Cloak that you can find as early as the 2nd chapter, that increases damage based on your temporary HP, which can go to enormous amounts because the Malpian Shroud itself already grants you through melee attacks, but most importantly, the Invigorating Resolve Talisman, also found early at the 2nd chapter. So you can definitely have higher than, let's say, 100 temporary hit points for loads of extra flat damage, something very rare in this game, that will then be multiplied from all your percentage modifiers. So essentially, in just one chainsaw strike, you can definitely hit for higher than 1000 damage. Now, if one chainsaw strike misses, the other ones of the same attack will also miss. But remember, as a Bladedancer, you have Blood Oath to ensure all of your attacks will hit as many times as you want. And as far as the limitation of, let's say, a chainsaw not working with some Bladedancer abilities, it doesn't matter because remember, in this game you can quickly switch back and forth weapons just fine during your turn at no cost whatsoever and no downsides. So if you want to use stuff like Death from Above and Blade Dance, well, just swap back to a sword. If you want to do a normal attack, go for the chainsaw. It's that simple. The second new weapon type is actually a ranged weapon, the Weber guns. They are kind of poor compared to how godly chainsaws are, I'm afraid. Basically, their unique mechanic is that you have a net cannon ability that can immobilize targets as a huge area of effect. And well, enemies that are stuck can't really move. They do have to fail an agility resistance test, however, and can even suffer damage during their turn if they don't recover from the debuff. Problem is, ranged enemies can of course still attack you, but the DLC does have a lot of new heavy-hitting melee enemies, so I suppose this can help make them stuck in place. But even then, I'd much rather just kill the enemies outright with a powerful Alpha Strike than wait for them to fail a saving throw and get stuck in place. But the chainsaws are definitely here to stay. And probably the best of the new melee weapon types, because each strike will deal your full melee damage, including from flat damage sources. Actually, we do have 3 new weapon types, I almost forgot this one, but there's also power picks. Their unique advantage is that they have, first, enormous armor penetration by default. Even the one you find at Act 1 already has super high armor penetration, which is a godsend on unfair when enemies have higher armor. And it even has a unique piercing strike ability that further increases your armor penetration. But chainsaws are definitely the best new addition gameplay-wise. Now let's cover all the other nice DLC stuff, starting with our new companion herself, Kibellah the Death Coat Assassin. Gameplay-wise, I don't think it needs any saying that she is a very powerful companion, if only because how powerful the Bladedancer class is. And she can come very early at around level 4, which means unlike some other companions, you do have a lot of control over her build, as you fully customize her the way you want, with the best talents and abilities. Besides that, she does come with some unique gear like her helmet, and also a blood vial that will apply pools of blood all over the battlefield. This does matter because of her unique Blood Blast and Blood Stain buffs and debuffs. So long as an ally is inside the blood pool, they'll have Blood Blast, which increases damage for each stack of it, while enemies will actually suffer increased damage. Plus, she has a unique Raining Blood ability that does the same whenever you target an enemy and in an area behind it. So she's definitely a beast gameplay-wise. What about story-wise? Well, I do think she's a very unique character, first because of her Death Coat background. Plus, she actually has a lot of interactions with the DLC content. And also, main game-wise. For example, she can even work as an advisor during some colony events for unique rewards. And of course, will react to some main quest content and dialogue. Plus, she can be romanced and is written in a very unique way. It's just that I'm not really that knowledgeable about Warhammer lore, especially Death Coat Assassin stuff. But there's a certain uniqueness to her writing, so she definitely stands out as a character. Now what about the rest of the DLC content? Well, for starters, one of my favorite parts is how many new areas we have. And these new areas are all neatly crafted and look absolutely amazing. Especially because they actually add way more atmosphere to your ship. You have, for example, multiple new ship areas like the Void Ship Shrine, also the Astropathic Chapel, and even the ship's Fright Line, which is basically the bowels of the ship, where commoners constantly toil and work. And these all serve to enhance your ship's atmosphere because, well, before, you basically were only stuck at either the ship's bridge or your personal quarters. Now, through these new areas, your ship actually feels like a living, breathing thing where people of all sorts actually exist and live and work inside it. Plus, the DLC also added some new crew member NPCs. And well, aren't some ships at least in Warhammer supposed to be these big cities where you can find everything? That is how your Void ship will feel like now. Besides that, I'm also very pleased to say that there is a lot of new DLC content when it comes to quests. First, it's spread through multiple chapters. In chapter 1 you have basically one big quest, an area, but starting from the second chapter you actually have multiple quests there related to the DLC, and the same is also true for chapter 4. As a matter of fact, it does feel like one of Alcat's biggest DLC to date, especially compared to Pathfinder stuff. Mostly because, as I said, the content is really spread through the game. It's not just one minor side adventure. Lastly, as far as the story of the DLC itself, well, I don't want to get into spoilers, but it's basically about this gene stealer cult that has been breeding inside your ship for centuries. So do expect to fight a lot of Xenos and genetic mutant aberration scum. Now, the only thing that disappointed me somewhat is that we didn't really get any new generic talents, I believe. There's a lot of unique stuff, of course, for each new archetype, but generic talents not really. And well, unlike Pathfinder, it feels like you'll quickly run out of good generic ones to pick, unless you're, let's say, a Psyker, because each Psyker school has unique talents. But for melee and ranged weapons, you usually only have 1 or 2 feats max that enhances their playstyle. Something I'd like to see expanded in later releases, perhaps. But overall, I'd say the Void Shadows DLC is definitely a must-have pick if you enjoy Warhammer. And as a matter of fact, now that we've finished covering the DLC, I'll soon post updated builds for not only all story companions, but also the main character, including my latest very powerful Psyker Pyromancer Blaster build, that can deal even higher than 20,000 damage. That's as good as it gets. Well, alright friends, so this was it for our Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader Void Shadows DLC review and overview guide. If you found it useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I highly appreciate your support. Thank you for watching, and see you next time, friends.